Hi, everyone. This is Raquel.
Hi, and this is Jennifer.
Welcome to Madness Cafe.
This is a feminist podcast where we talk about women's issues, politics, and health and wellness.
And where those issues intersect. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Madness Cafe. Today, it's time for another installment of our banned book series. And we're talking about this lovely book right here, The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. And I'm just going to read the blurb on the back really quick. Such a good book. I love this. The heart-stopping, award-winning novel in verse about an unstoppable young Afro-Latina poet who tells her own story with blazing words and powerful truth. Yes, that encapsulates this book. And I want to say why it was banned, or a little bit about that whole thing. There's a couple in, where is it? Is it North Carolina? It's always one of those. Yeah, North Carolina. There's a couple in North Carolina who challenged the book because they claim that it is anti-Christian and violates their religious freedom due to the protagonist's questioning of her Catholic faith within the story, particularly regarding issues like sexuality and gender roles within the church. God forbid that somebody question anything. Anywho. That's my editorial.
Well, it's a good editorial. That's the issue we see right now in politics with Christian nationalism, is that they don't want people, especially their children, to have access to books that have main character or supporting characters, for that matter, anyone for that matter, right, questioning what the church is telling them. They don't want that questioned. But in all of reality, I would say, this is from my own experience, I would say the people that I know that have the biggest faith, the true belief in religion, are those that questioned their religion and came around to a place of deeper understanding, more acceptance, really learning and understanding the virtues of their religion, like compassion, like charity is done in the Bible, those types of things. Right. I don't know a whole lot of people, actually, because like I've said a million times, my mom left the Catholic Church before I was born.
Yeah.
But my grandmother and my mother, I think, were both really good examples of people who questioned their religion and came back to some sort of belief, but true belief in God, rather than being told what they should believe.
Right.
But I always ask the question, if you're so fucking fearful of people questioning it, do you not have a solid case?
Exactly.
Right? Like,
exactly.
Like, is that the real issue here? You just don't have a solid case.
But how dare you put it to them that way? How dare, Jennifer? Damn it.
Well, to talk about the book, the way that our main character, and I'm going to try to say her name, so you tell me if it's wrong, because we know I struggle with this. Ciamara. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's Ciamara.
What was really cool is she said how to pronounce it. On page 7.
Yes.
And every time her name was said in the book, I went back to page 7 and practiced again.
Yeah. I actually underlined that part where
this is not a skill that comes easily to me.
Yeah. That's okay.
Well, it's not, because people's names need to be said correctly. So I keep trying.
You do.
Say her name one more time.
Ciamara.
The way that she, in my opinion, questions her Catholic upbringing, her Catholic religion, is really not offensive. To me, she's been told all these things and she's just asking about it. It's not, it reminds me of when I go to the doctor and I ask about immunizations. It doesn't make me an anti-vaxxer. I just want to know. I have questions. I'm curious.
Yeah.
That's what she reminded me of in the book, was tell me a little bit more about this. I like, how does it work? I'm not understanding it. I don't think she's trying to say, there is no God and Catholics are off their rocker, although she may feel that way about her mother a little bit.
A little bit. Yeah. Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. I do. And there's a part in the book, and I tried to put a little flag on it, where she's in her what's it called? Confirmation class. Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm not religious, people. I stopped going to church with any regularity as a wee tot when I told my mom I didn't want to go anymore. So there's a lot about organized religion that I just don't know
Yeah.
because it's not part of my
That's not part of mine
reality.
either.
Right. But on page 120, and she calls it, I think the story of Genesis is mad stupid. I was like, yeah. And a lot of what she's bringing up makes absolute sense to me. Like, I was like, oh, she's in my head. I've always thought this. I don't know if this is an actual memory or if I just sort of made it up, but I seem to remember my grandma even saying to me that the Bible is not, it's not a historical document per se. Like, it's not like this actually happened. It's more of like a book of metaphors, or it's a book of
Fables.
fables, like book, it's a book of, you're supposed to derive lessons from it, right? So on page 120, she says, and I'm going to jump around a little bit because I didn't underline the whole thing, because otherwise I would have underlined the entire book. She says, unless the 7 day, talking about God creating the world in 7 days, unless the 7 days is a metaphor, unless Adam's creation was a metaphor too. And about this apple, how come God didn't explain why they couldn't eat it? He gave Eve curiosity, but didn't expect her to use it. Unless the Bible is a metaphor, is the whole Bible a poem? What's not a metaphor? Did any of it actually happen? That hit me so hard. I was like, yes, that I have always thought all
Yeah.
of this.
Yeah.
And I know that there's certain things that people can point to that are historical, that, like the, what is it, the Shroud of Turin, and there's relics found in biblical places that point to some of these things happening. Okay, that's fine, but that doesn't mean that the Bible is
Literal.
a literal historical document.
Right. It's not.
It's, yeah, it's absolutely not. And I could see somebody who's a biblical literalist reading this passage and thinking, oh, get this out of schools. Nobody needs to read that. How dare people question? Well, this is offensive. Do you know what I mean? Like, I could see them being
Oh,
like, ah,
absolutely. Again, Christian nationalism. I think that's the whole point, is that that creation story
mm-hmm,
reads and describes creation in exactly the way that they want us to believe it.
mm-hmm,
Adam was the firstborn. Eve was made from Adam,
mm-hmm.
even though she has a uterus and he doesn't, and she can make
Mm,
babies and he can't.
yeah,
But
exactly.
but besides all that, Eve was the one who was tempted. Eve is the one who bit of the apple. So therefore, women are trouble.
Mm-hmm,
Seems like that fits just right in tune with patriarchy, Christian
mm-hmm.
nationalism, head of the household families,
Yep.
don't
Yeah.
want women to vote.
Do
Women,
exactly as I tell you. Like,
exactly.
and why didn't God tell them why the apple was bad?
Because it's not real.
Well, no, no, I know exactly. But again, it's that whole theory of man as the head of the household, do as I say.
Yeah.
Don't question,
Don't
just
ask.
don't
Don't
ask
ask
any
this
questions at
question.
all. Don't talk back, don't think about it. Just when I say jump, don't even say how high, just jump.
One of the things that I find really interesting about this whole story, and I love this book, by the way. I think I called you and told you I cried twice while I was reading it.
Yeah.
I was brought to tears. I didn't like boo-hoo, but I was just so full of feeling when I read it. And I think
Yes.
because of trying to understand my own family's struggle with the whole Catholic Church, to be honest.
Right. And you know what? I thought about you when I was reading this. I thought about you and your family's relationship to religion and your relationship to religion because of what your mother and your grandmother, how they experienced religion and their reactions to it.
I could see my mom being very much like the character in this story.
Mhm.
My grandmother went to church every single day of her life
Mm.
when she
Wow.
could. She was very devout. I could see my mom having the same coming of age struggles
Mhm.
as this woman did. The
Mhm.
only thing I think maybe missing from our personal story, which I find so interesting about this one, is that there is a level of, how do I say it? There's also a level of colonialism here
Mhm.
because their family is from the Dominican Republic,
Right.
which was colonized and converted to Catholicism by
Mhm.
their colonizers. That was
Right.
not their traditional
Their
religion
traditional
per
religion and
se.
yeah.
So there's also this deep level of, this is her mother is so like my grandmother's so in tune to the church, going every single day, has put all of her belief and everything into it, and yet it really isn't their history.
Mhm.
So it's kind of, it puts a whole nother level into it for me, and it makes me question my ultimate history as well. Like, where does this come from in a family?
Mhm.
And when you look at, I'm somewhat adjacent to Mexico because my children are half Mexican,
Right.
and I think about their colonization history, and my ex's family, they're all Catholic as well. But
Mm.
that's really not of their,
That's not their traditional
yeah, they're Native
religion.
Americans. I mean, not Americans, US Americans, but they're Native Americans. They live
Yeah,
on the
they're
continent.
indigenous. Yeah, they're indigenous peoples. And
Yes.
the indigenous religions generally were not Catholic.
No, they weren't. That's the
Catholic
colonizers.
Catholicism is very Eurocentric.
But what's interesting is in my travels in Mexico is some of the traditional religious aspects are mixed with the
Mhm.
Catholic
Mhm.
uh influence, and it's sort of like speaking Spanglish in
Mhm.
your, everything has sort of mixed.
Right.
It's,
Right.
but anyway, I'm getting way off topic. It just made me think a lot, and I think the reason the book touched me is I could see my mom in this book with
Wow.
her saying, "Wait a second, why am I Eve? Why did I eat the apple? Why am I the one born of sin? Why am I
Mhm.
always in trouble? And hey, wait a second, this doesn't make sense." And also, I think, the whole question of sexuality
Yeah.
as it came up as a high schooler. And that's another reason it got banned, because people don't like high schoolers talking about sex. But let's
Mhm.
be for real. Were you talking about sex in high school?
Yeah.
I mean, I think all the high schoolers are
Yeah.
talking about it.
Yeah.
Most of them
Yeah.
are probably doing it, but they're
Yeah.
definitely talking about it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But I think but the cool thing about this book and the way that Acevedo tells the story of Xiomara dealing with her burgeoning sexuality is that it's in that like weird dichotomy of men and boys are seeing me a certain way,
Oh yeah.
not totally comfortable with it,
Oh
but
yeah.
oh, it's kind of nice that I'm being, seen in that way. And I do kind of want to be, but I don't. And
Yeah.
so
It's
that
so real.
whole weird, yeah, I mean, and that's where I saw myself was in that of
So real.
when your body is starting to change, and her whole thing of feeling bigger than everybody and
Oh
feeling
yeah.
like you're developing so much before everybody. I was like, "Yep, yep, here I am, right here," and feeling like my body is taking up too much space and people are paying too much attention to it. That felt so real to me.
So real. So real. It's called Unhideable.
Mhm.
I am unhideable. This is on page 5.
Okay.
Taller than even my father, with what mommy has always said was a little too much body for such a young girl. I am the baby fat that settled into D cups and swinging hips, so that the boys who called me a whale in middle school now ask me to send them pictures of myself in a thong.
Mhm.
The other girls call me conceited, ho, thought, fast. When your body takes up more room than your voice, you are always a target of well aimed rumors, which is why I let my knuckles talk for me, which is why I learned to shrug when my name was replaced by insults. I forced my skin just as thick as I am. A,
Yep.
a thick, a thick young girl, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
felt, I felt that.
I did too.
I
I
felt
did too.
the unwanted stare, the jokes, I could hear people snickering and I barely understood what they were snickering about.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
I could feel the way that they were looking at me.
Yeah. Or just I remember, man, I was so young. Maybe I was 11, about to be 11, and I remember, I think we've talked about this on the show before, that here it was, the middle of summer, it's hot as hell, I'm in the South, I'm wearing shorts like any other little girl,
Yep.
shorts and a t-shirt, I mean, nothing out of the ordinary or quote unquote wrong. I was walking on the sidewalk with, I don't know, it's probably my cousins, and we walk by this group of men sitting
Gross.
outside
Fucking
there,
gross, man.
and I just remember that feeling. Like I don't have the memory of them saying anything, and maybe I just blacked that out, but I just remember that feeling of all of a sudden I'm not safe.
Yep.
Why am I being looked at like this? Yeah, it was just weird.
And I wonder if men ever really sat with it for a moment and they thought, oh my gosh, I'm having that effect on this young girl. If they ever would just think about that for a moment, if that would stop this behavior. Because
I don't think they think about it
they
until
don't think about it.
they maybe they think about it when they become
Have a daughter.
fathers to daughters. And maybe if their daughter mentions it, they might take the time to go, "Oh, shit."
I know men like to say it's biology, that it's 8 million years of biology, but
It's bullshit.
I just feel like our brains have fucking evolved, right?
Mhm, mhm.
We can make it, women make decisions all the time
Yeah.
about how they want to change and be better people.
Mhm,
In this situation, when we were talking about children,
mhm.
especially girl children, but it happens to boy children too, why can't they just decide, oh, I'm not going to sexualize young people? I'm just not going to do that because
Be nice.
because young people are not sexually attractive. Maybe they do find them sexually attractive. Maybe this is part of the
Or
problem.
how about just
But
exercise some control?
yeah,
Just
okay.
just keep your mouth shut.
I'm just not going to sexualize them. I'm not going to
Yeah,
look at them in that way. Okay,
yeah.
let's say maybe they do find them sexually attractive, but can they make the decision to avert their eyes and not put that on the person that they're sexualizing? I was a sexualized little girl
Mhm. Same.
and I hate it so much.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
I think you adult men, and maybe there were some women involved too. Come on, let's evolve. Let's take some responsibility. Let's change. Let's be fucking better people.
Yeah.
What is the big deal? You avert your eyes. You decide not to project that outward.
Mhm, mhm,
And it's
mhm.
so confusing for a young girl because I get what she's saying. Like, I was a chubby kid too. Like, I was heavy.
Mhm.
I wasn't terribly like what, but I was called names like whale and stuff like that.
Mhm.
One minute I'm the fat kid, the next minute I got boobs, and guys are like looking at them.
Yeah. Yeah. Like,
It's confusing.
yeah, like I mean, because we've talked about how, I started my period real early. I started developing early. I had boobs and hips way before my peers. And so I literally felt like I was ginormous. And I look back at pictures. I mean, I wasn't.
You weren't,
I just had a womanly figure at an early age.
but that doesn't make you a woman.
Exactly, exactly.
And
But
that is what is so frustrating about this whole thing.
hmm hmm yeah. But
Enough
but I
said.
think I think Acevedo does a
Oh,
superb job
oh, that's the
at
reason I cried.
expressing that dichotomy and that confusion of I don't want to be seen that way, but I want to know what it's like to be loved or to be
Kissed.
held or kissed or
Yeah.
and so
To
it's
have an appropriate attraction to a boy of her own age
right,
who is
right.
in school with her.
Yeah, and a boy who is going to treat her with respect. Not like the boys who, in her class are like, yeah, send me a picture of you in a thong. Oh, let me walk by and grab your ass. And oh, let me make inappropriate comments. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Nobody wants that.
No.
Right. She's like, okay, that's awful. And she's like, I'm gonna bust somebody in the face. But she then, meets Amon and she's like, he's
Yeah, he's
he's he's
cute.
he's cute. He's
He's so
cute.
cute.
He's cute.
I
He's
like
cute. I
him.
like him. I'm gonna wear him. Oh, he listens to this and that. No.
Yeah, but that's young love. That's so
Right.
innocent. It's not full of the I like the way you shake your ass down the road.
Right.
It's like we listen to the same music. I like when
Yeah.
you read poetry aloud. We like kind of flirt with each other while we're sitting in the lab together.
Yeah.
That's sweet, innocent young love.
Mhm. Mhm.
And it does develop. That's where sexuality is blossoming. And in this
Right.
culture, we don't want to talk about that.
Yeah.
We want to sell all kinds of porn, but we want to ban when we're talking about actual young, sweet sexuality blossoming.
Right. And learning to understand what all of these burgeoning feelings mean and where they're coming from and how do I handle these? And I just do my friends feel the same stuff that I'm feeling? What's going on? It is so clear and precise in how it's described in this
Mm,
book
beautiful.
and in so few words
And in
too.
poetry,
Right, in poetry.
the
Yeah,
whole book is poetry.
right. It's so beautifully done. And I know we've read other books where we talk about how, wow, so much is expressed in so few words. That totally applies to poetry, to novel in verse, to this book specifically. It's
Oh, yeah.
amazing the emotion that is and the pictures that are drawn and evoked from the words in this book. I mean, it's
I,
amazing.
I think this book is a particular kind of genius.
Mm-hmm.
One brain in the entire world could create this. You want to talk about like AI writing coming out? There's no AI that's going to write something like
No,
this. This is
no.
one person's brain
Yeah,
no one else could write a story like this.
yeah. And it's so
You could try, but it wouldn't be the same.
yeah, and so much emotion. And the way that Acevedo has Ciamara talking about and writing about her relationship with her mother, her relationship with her own changing body and feelings, and her first love, and her relationship with her brother and her family,
And her best friend.
and her best friend,
Yeah.
learning to find her voice. That's some of the, I mean, there's a lot of powerful stuff in this book,
Oh, yeah.
but when Ciamara is finding her voice developing confidence in that voice, that is some of the best stuff in
Yeah.
here.
And she shows the struggle in it. Okay, she's developing this young love. She's developing this questioning of her religion, and she's talking to her best friend about it. And her best friend is like, "Are you nuts? What are you doing here?" But loves her, holds
Mhm.
her. She semi talks to Twin about it, but not
Right.
really. She can't really talk to her mom about it, but
Not
she's
at all.
trying to figure out how to brace that relationship. And then
She
and
can't talk
then
to her dad about it.
and then what happens when she's sort of like caught, when they read her poetry, when they find out what she's doing,
Oh my
and
God.
the actual, I would call it actual physical abuse, but also some
Mhm.
spiritual abuse in this household.
Mhm. Mhm.
And these are realities for people. And
Yeah.
that also makes me think about my mother. Did
Mm.
my mother suffer that same type of spiritual abuse?
Mm.
Because when you are raised in such a tight religious community, I
Mhm.
don't know, I wasn't. I'm
Yeah, me either.
just book just helps me to understand.
Right.
And they expect you to believe that way, and they expect you not to question, and they just
Mhm.
expect you to follow, especially if you're a girl
Absolutely.
and you don't. And what those consequences are, she definitely was physically abused, probably spiritually abused, but in some ways she's lucky she wasn't excommunicated, because that, to be
Mhm.
completely shunned and driven away from the home, is something that happens to a lot of people when they're questioning their religious identity.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and I'm really surprised that when she was in the confirmation class and she brought up, "Isn't the Bible just a metaphor? Aren't all of these stories just metaphors?" I was really shocked that Father Sean wasn't like, "All right, out of here. Out with you. Get out. Tell your mom not to bring you back." Like, like, "Get out of my class."
Well, it seems to me Father Sean was possibly a kind religious figure. He
I think he became a kind religious figure. I think in the beginning, I think maybe he was a little dogmatic. Like,
maybe
I think he was taken aback by her questioning and being so bold, maybe, in the way that she was questioning the Bible and the way that women are seen in the Bible and
yeah,
in religion.
but also maybe some of the brilliance of her writing, because isn't that the way she would have seen Father Sean, whether he was that way or not? Like, as
Ah,
a child, she would see him as very dogmatic, unaccepting of any question, because she hasn't questioned anything yet.
right. Okay. Yeah,
And then
that's a good point.
as she's gaining confidence and she's speaking more out, he actually, you know, supports her a little bit, like not
Mhm.
overboard or anything, but
Right.
he helps to kind of let her know that it's okay to somewhat question.
Right,
Like,
right.
not overboard.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a very good point. I think that is
From
something that maybe that didn't click for me. But yeah, that does make sense.
And it would be a child's perspective
Mhm.
in church, right?
Yeah.
Because it does seem dogmatic. And I'm assuming there are really kind religious leaders out there.
Mhm.
I'm assuming
Mhm.
that some of them are full of love and grace, and I think my grand
Compassion.
and compassion and all these things that we call Christian. I'm assuming there's lots of really great Christian people out there,
Mhm.
leaders specifically what I'm talking about.
Right, right, right.
But as a child, when you're told, especially you live in a household with their mother being so dogmatic, I'm assuming that she thinks that everyone in church is that dogmatic.
Right. That makes sense.
I
That
would
totally
think,
makes sense.
I
Yeah.
would think that
Mhm.
he actually is somewhat supportive in her learning. It's almost like he's confident enough in his belief in God that he's like, question and come
Yeah.
back when you're ready.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it's almost
It's
like
funny
he's,
how that works.
yeah, it's almost like he's like secure enough that he's like, yeah, do some research, check it
Mhm.
out for yourself.
Right.
I'm always here if you want to be here.
Right, right. Exactly.
What a beautiful thing.
Absolutely.
Maybe that's how religion should be.
Yeah. For instance, the I think she's a bishop who
Oh, yeah,
when
yeah,
when
yeah,
Trump
yeah,
was
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Trump
yeah,
was
yeah.
in that church with,
Oh,
all these
yeah,
other
yeah.
people. It was like a prayer meeting or whatever at a church.
Yeah.
And, this, I think she's a bishop. But anyway, she was maybe the second person to get up. And, she's being very pointed, like, hey, maybe you should have some compassion. Imagine that. I'm
Yeah.
asking you, have some compassion. And he's like,
For them, like church is like this performative thing.
mhm,
I'm just
mhm.
gonna show up to church and talk about loving Jesus, and then we'll just go cut everybody's funding for any type of life saving, or
Yeah, yeah.
um
We'll just gut Social
we'll just
Security and
fire thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people, and you not worry
yeah, who cares?
where their food comes from. No, it was just waste. That's
Yeah,
just
that's not my
wasteful spending.
problem.
Kids don't need lunch at school.
And nobody needs to eat. Nobody needs to be able to pay for things. It shouldn't be affordable. Blah.
Some of the themes of this book:
Hmm.
coming of age,
Yep.
religion, sexuality, we've already mentioned, dysfunctional family and abuse. I think there was
Hmm.
quite a bit of underlying abuse in this family.
Yeah.
Poetry and the power of words,
Hmm.
the generational gap. I think my mom and her mother had that generational gap. Sexual harassment, which we've talked about,
Hmm. Oh,
sexist
go ahead.
sexist gender roles, the fact that she and her brother, exactly the same age twins, were given
Hmm.
completely different assignments in the home, but abilities to be out and about, homophobia, immigration, mentorship, first love, female empowerment,
Hmm.
courage of finding one's voice, which you talked about. And then perhaps one of the most compelling to me, forgiveness and reconciliation.
Yes. For me, the most powerful was finding one's own voice,
Yeah.
for sure. We see the self-confidence, even the change in the way that she carries herself as she's on that journey of finding her voice. The whole thing of she would stand up for twin, and yeah, she would come to blows with somebody real quick, but really, really standing up for herself and using her voice, that took a lot longer to happen. To see her sharing her thoughts and her feelings via poetry and the poetry slams, and seeing the effect that her words have on other people, that was huge for me. Maybe that resonated more for me because I've been in that situation more than I've been in a situation where I had to fight for forgiveness or fight for reconciliation. Thankfully, I've not had a relationship with my mother the way that was similar to the relationship that Ciamara has with her mother. But that whole feeling of what's my voice? What do
Podcast.
exactly, exactly.
It's like Samora had the poetry, you and I have the podcast.
Absolutely. Seeing the strength of her voice grow throughout, that was such an amazing journey for me to witness, and then to think, oh, this really speaks to me. One of the things that I thought was interesting in how Acevedo portrayed that was when she would write her rough drafts of her
Oh, I love
assignments,
those. Oh, I
and the
love
rough
those.
draft would be all like blah, 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 like real world, like
I
real talk, and then
that
she'd
part.
show the one that was actually turned in, and they were like night and day. But
Yes, and the
toward the
rough
end,
drafts were so good.
I know, I love the rough drafts. I'm like, turn that one in, turn that one in. But then toward the end, her rough draft and her final assignment were the same thing.
Yeah.
And I loved that.
Again, a certain kind of brilliance. Like I don't think we could see, okay, every human is an individual. So obviously the work and creativity that comes from them is going to be individual. But I
Right.
think this book is so different. There's no other writer human that could create this book the way that this was created.
Yeah.
This was her
This is her first
debut.
novel. Yeah. Brilliant.
Yeah, brilliant.
Oh, good.
I think this is one of my favorite things I've ever read. I'm not a poetry person, so
I think you're becoming one.
I keep saying I'm not a poetry person, and then we read something like this, and
yeah, and this is classified as like a young adult novel.
it's because it takes place in high school.
Right, but I have a hard time with that because just because the protagonist is 15 turning 16, that's stupid because that makes it a young adult. No, there are themes in this that resonate with full-grown adults.
Well, of course.
Yeah, fine. Put it in the YA category, fine. But
if you didn't put it in the YA category, then the high school students wouldn't find it, or
well, that's true.
Or no, it wouldn't be banned either, by the way. It wouldn't be banned, but also
no, it still would be banned.
Maybe,
because
but they really
still the questioning.
I hear you, but they really focus on the book banners, the band bookers, the band booker bands, the
book banners.
The people who are trying to ban books focus on those books that are in the junior high and high school level.
That's true.
They put a lot of because those school board meetings get pretty fucking heated about what should be in that library and what shouldn't be in that library. And as we've said before, some counties are actually, once the book is banned, you get fined if you're a teacher and you hand this book to a student.
Mm-hmm.
So you could have a similar student in your classroom and you're wanting to give them some representation and you can't. That is the effect of book banning.
That sucks. So here's my call to action. For people who are not teachers, who are not librarians, so thus you're not going to get fined, give this book or go to jail. Give this book to a young person, many young people, older people. Just give this book to people. Seriously. Because they aren't fining and jailing regular people for giving out this book. Not yet.
They're not. Educators.
So, well, right. So at this point, give this book to somebody. This is just, it's such a good book.
I'm going to read something that totally spoke to me, and it's really short.
Okay.
It's on page 283. This poem is called All the Way Hype, but I just want to read the last little bit about it. She's talking about writing late at night in her journals. And she says, "It almost feels like the more I bruise the page, the quicker something inside me heals. Tuesdays has become my equivalent to Mommy's Sunday, a prayer circle." So Tuesday is the day that she meets with her poetry group. Secretly, she's supposed to be at
I underlined the same thing.
Two things really, really, really struck out to me is that, number one, I feel the same way as a writer. The more and more and more and more I write, the healthier I feel. Regardless of who reads it. I really do like people to read it. It gives me a lot of pleasure to hear what they have to say about it. It also feels very validating, but the actual physical writing of it helps to release some of that body trauma. Number one. Number two, Tuesdays has become my equivalent to Mommy's Sunday, a prayer circle. We all find community in different places. Mommy did find community in church, and that's well and good for her and probably very important in the same way that my grandmother found her community in church.
Right.
But when people try to tell other people, especially their children, where they have to find their community, that is where we make mistakes.
Right.
It is the goal, the beauty to find one's own community. For me, it's been in the breath work, and it's been with you and podcasting, and we've built a community of women. That's community, but my grandmother's church wouldn't have given me that. It wouldn't have given you that. Right. And so I think a prayer circle, they're reading poetry, but it is their prayer circle. The words just,
And this speaks to me a reason why this book should not be attacked as being anti-Christian.
Oh, it's not anti-Christian.
And it also speaks to what you're talking about. So on page 356, when I was talking before about how the first and the final draft became the same. So I'm gonna skip about, but I'm gonna read the parts in here that really, really touched me. So the assignment is explain your favorite quote. And she puts her quote in here: the unfolding of your words gives light. It gives understanding to the simple, which is Psalm 119, 130. And she goes on to say, the weird thing about the Bible is that almost everything in it is a metaphor. But if everything is a metaphor, I think he or she is a comparison to us. I think we are all like God or as God. I think when we get together and talk about ourselves, about being human, about what hurts us, we're also talking about God. So that's also church, right? I love this quote because even though it's not about poetry, it is about poetry. It's about any of the words that bring us together and how we can form a home in them.
Yep.
I only know that learning to believe in the power of my own words has been the most freeing experience of my life. It has brought me the most light. And isn't that what a poem is? A lantern glowing in the dark. And then I wrote right after reading that, and now I'm brought to tears.
You too, huh?
Yeah, literally. I mean, I was sitting on my patio and I was reading that part, and I felt my eyes well up, and the feeling in my chest that I'm getting right now. Yes, that is it. That is
So,
it.
so why are people in the church so afraid of people making their own relationship with God? Because in a way, all she's saying is poetry is my language with God.
Right, right.
Or she's saying, I find prayer in my poetry circles. Whereas I used to say to people, I find God on the soccer field. As a culture, why are we so dogmatic that if you don't find God the way that I find God, then your God
Then
isn't
you're going to
God?
hell and you're gonna burn. And
Yeah. I mean, what is it that
I, I, I know we keep coming back to it, but I swear to God, I do believe this is true. I think it's patriarchy, because part of patriarchy is control and being on top. Do as I say, do as I say, do as I say. It has to be my way or the highway. That's it. This is the only right way.
okay, but did you see your face when you were doing that? No, you didn't, because I was looking
Mm-mm.
at you, but you were talking. You were like,
Well,
and that's what I see. That's what I see with these politicians and these people in the church. Not every church, these like high control religions where they're like, rah, 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 and their faces. These people do not look happy and full of love.
no, and I see a lot of fear and im imposition of fear. Like they really want other people to feel fear, and they want
Why?
people to be afraid of stepping out of line.
The damnation of their soul.
Right, right. And if you step out of line, you're going to get kicked out of the religion or out of the church or the mosque or wherever your place of worship is. Right?
Or any
That
group for
that
that
you
matter.
right, that you can't have a relationship to this source on your own. You need us to be the conduit for you.
People also don't like it. People also
Mm.
don't like it when she said in those words that you were reading that I am like a god, that a
Yeah,
person is like they don't like it when we attribute godliness to ourselves.
right, right. If we were made in his or her image, aren't
Well,
we
I
all
certainly,
godlike?
yeah, we are. If we're all one,
Right,
right? If all creation is one, we're actually all God, and God is
exactly.
us, and everything. We're yeah. Anyway, interesting. Page 14, she says, It's not any one thing that makes me wonder about capital God, about a holy trinity that don't include the mother. It's all the things. Just seems as I get older, I begin to really see the way that church treats a girl like me differently. Sometimes it feels all I'm worth is under my skirt and not between my ears. Sometimes I feel the turning the other cheek could get someone like my brother killed. Sometimes I feel my life would be easier if it didn't feel like such a debt to a God that don't really seem to be out there checking for me.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't we question God?
Right. If the image that we're presented with as the only image is of God as male, the Holy Trinity is male, women are only seen for one thing, blah blah blah. I'm sorry, but you're
You're
not
not selling
selling
it.
it.
We're not buying.
Exactly.
But what's interesting about this is what did they ban this because it was a anti-Christian book?
Yeah.
On page 14, what I just read, she was questioning God.
Yeah.
You read something on page all the way to the end of the book
Yeah.
where she found God.
Yeah.
So this book is not about
It is not anti-Christian.
This book is about finding God in many ways.
Yeah, in more than one way. That there's more than one way to get to God. There's more
Yeah.
than one way to have a relationship with whatever you deem source to be. And that is amazing. And all of that in so few words.
Yeah, it's quite a book.
It's such a beautiful book. And I have a feeling I have a feeling that we're going to say that or some version of that about
every band book we read.
Right, exactly.
So far, they've all knocked my socks off. I didn't just like them. They've all been exceptional.
Yeah, and you know what? I think that's part of why they're banned is that people understand how powerful these books are. And they don't want people to be affected so strongly by something that isn't the Bible. But that is so fucking stupid.
Yeah.
There are so many books and words and experiences that can affect a person as deeply as some people are affected by the Bible. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Wouldn't more people come to God if they could experience God as themselves?
You would think.
Wouldn't we have more relationship with God?
Right. Wouldn't we have more quote unquote believers if people could come to the source as themselves?
So that isn't what they want. They don't want believers. They want compliers.
Yes. Yes. They want followers.
Who is they?
Again, it's patriarchy.
This is where it gets really confusing. When you talk to average, ordinary people that you know, they don't want all that, right?
I think
most normal people just want to let live and do their own thing and make enough money to eat and feed their kids and go to school and maybe have some time to do some hobbies, and they're just hoping for a better life. They're not really all that concerned with who you're praying to.
Yeah, until somebody stirs up the fear and stirs up the hate.
Right.
And tells you that you should be fearful of so-and-so and you should hate so-and-so is wrong and blah, blah. Whereas before you may not have given so-and-so a thought.
See, I think what mommy in the book wanted for her daughter was this deep sense of love and belonging that she found in the church. It was hard for her to understand that her daughter didn't get those same feelings of deep love and belonging there. And she wanted that. I don't see that as like hurtful dogma, but I do think that some of the abuse that came from it that came from that deep desire to have your child experience the same love and belonging that you do.
I also think a lot of mommy's, what's the word I'm like, a stringent, rigid feeling about all of this came from the fact that she didn't get to realize her dream.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
she
yeah,
wanted to be, basically, she wanted to be a nun.
yeah, yeah.
And she was forced to marry, uh,
Daddy.
yeah, to
Poppy.
marry
Poppy.
Poppy, yeah, to marry Xiomara and Twins' dad.
Right.
She was forced to get married and
Yep,
have
yep.
children, and she
I had
didn't want
forgotten
that.
that fact.
She is like, I wasn't able to do this, so I'm going to force this on my daughter.
Probably more subconsciously than consciously, pushing her into a direction that she would have wanted for herself. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yes. You definitely see that in this book.
Yeah.
Okay. The question you always ask me, did you find anything surprising or in it something you didn't like about the book?
I honestly don't think there was anything that I didn't like. There was one incident that occurred that I was like, "Ooh." No, well, there were a couple of incidents that occurred that I was like, "Ooh," but I get it, right? Like they made sense. Like the situation where Amon didn't do anything when the boys basically came up to Siamara and grabbed her ass.
He
It
was a
kind of
little
makes
chicken
sense.
shit.
Right. I mean, but I get it. He's a 15-year-old too. He's a kid. He's a
Right.
kid, right? So, yeah, I was pissed at him for not being her savior,
Yeah.
but A, he's a kid. B, she didn't need a savior. C, it's more realistic. And I really, oh God, I'm not going to give anything away, but the big sort of climactic scene between Siamara and her mom. Oh, I hated that scene so much. I hated
Yeah.
it. Oh, it was breaking my heart as it
It
was
was
happening.
tough.
It was so hard,
It's tough.
but it was so realistic. As I was reading that, I was just so grateful that, as complicated as my relationship with my mother is and has always been, that was not part of my relationship with my mother. And I
Yeah.
was so grateful for that.
We often hurt the ones that we love the most.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that scene was really hard to take. And I also didn't have that relationship with my mom.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very possible that my mom had that relationship with her mother. My mom
Mm,
did not like my grandma, and she made that
mm,
clear. She talked about it when we were growing up, probably because of that same. I don't know about the abuse or whatever. I have no idea about that, but
right.
definitely same very strong control. Catholic woman gonna control this family, and my
Mm-hmm.
mom wasn't having it.
Yeah.
So, which I am totally grateful for.
Yeah.
I am totally grateful for my mom's courage.
Right. And it is courage
It's a lot of courage.
to stand up to any sort of, whether it's your family or your church or
I feel standing up to
government.
your mother is
That's
probably
hard.
the hardest thing you would do, probably.
So hard. What about you? Was there anything that you didn't like about the
Mm,
book?
not anything that I can think of offhand. What I found the most surprising is that on the surface, the main character and I have nothing in common. But you peel back a little bit of layer, and we had everything in common.
Yep.
I mean, everything down to what it feels like to be a young girl walking the schools of your high school, what it feels like not to be protected, what it feels like to have those stares, what it feels like to try to find your voice and be confused about it, even to have a mentor, to have one teacher that really speaks and helps you find a path, those
Mm-hmm.
things. And then struggling with belief at home, all of those things. When we look at humanity, we all have a lot more in common than we think we do.
Mm-hmm.
So I did find that a little surprising to relate so well with a 15-year-old girl growing up in Harlem,
Yeah,
right?
a Dominican girl who's very, very Catholic or raised very, very
Yeah,
Catholic.
we have a lot in common. What I didn't like, there's nothing to be a fault of this book. It was a
Mhm.
beautifully written, beautifully executed. the topics were hard. I didn't like the topics sometimes, but that's why we read these books.
Right. So we gain a greater understanding of other people, other situations. We learn empathy by reading.
Didn't J.D. Vance just recently say that the problem with the United States is we have too much empathy?
Ugh.
I think that's what he said. I think he said we have too much empathy. Oh, no, it wasn't J.D. Vance. It was Elon Musk. Sorry.
Ugh.
Elon Musk
Ugh.
said one of the problems with the American culture is we have too much empathy.
That's bullshit. You can never have too much empathy.
It's interesting because I've started our next book for the podcast, not the banned book, but one that you and I are reading that's coming up soon. And she goes into the difference between empathy and compassion. And I think it's really important. And I'm sure we'll talk about it. Hold that thought. I think in some instances you can have too much empathy.
Okay.
But I don't think that this is the problem with the US people. I think the problem is we don't always know the difference between empathy and compassion.
That makes sense.
And I'm just getting this from this book I just started. And Elon Musk has neither. And that's why he doesn't know that we must be a nation who feels empathy. We must be a nation who has compassion. Humanity has to have those things or we will not survive. We're not a fucking business. Cutting someone's school lunch to be more productive is not humanity.
And it certainly doesn't make people more productive to skip a meal, to skip many meals, to skip any meals at all.
It's absolutely ludicrous. The sign of a functioning society is how well we take care of everyone.
Right.
And right now, we're not taking very good care of our people.
We're not at all.
What are your final thoughts on this beautiful, beautiful book?
I am so blown away by this book, and I'm so blown away by Elizabeth Acevedo's talent as a writer, as a poet, as a storyteller. I want to read more from her.
I felt that too.
And I feel that there's so much in her just bursting to come out. I truly hope that Elizabeth Acevedo has a long, flourishing, successful writing career, whether it's more novels in verse or books of strictly poetry or however she decides to get her words out into the world. I wish all of the best for her, and I want to consume more of what she has to say. What about you?
I was touched by reading it. I mean, deeply, deeply, deeply touched. I think that kids in schools should be reading this book. I think that we should stop worrying about books that have topics around sex. Of course, we should be looking at age appropriate discussions, but kids are talking about sex, and withholding information is not getting us anywhere. We need to have intelligent discussions around sex and sexuality and around religion and around all of those topics that we listed earlier that this book is about. We need those discussions to help kids navigate where they're going.
Yeah.
And to help them to see themselves so they know that they're not alone.
Absolutely. And to understand the people around them.
I think it's an important book. I think you're right. I think we're going to love every banned book in this series, but I'm really grateful that we read this one.
I am too. Very much so. Elizabeth Acevedo, if you ever hear this, thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth Acevedo, for reading this book and putting these words into the world.
And give us a 5-star review. Bye,
Thanks, Jennifer. Bye. Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you like this episode, please share it with a friend.
Or you could leave us a comment and a 5-star review, or email us at madnesscafepodcast@gmail.com.
Thanks, everybody.